Hey guys, tonight we are wandering into the lantern-lit streets of Ottoman Istanbul, where coffee was more than a drink, it was practically a religion. A gossip column and a stage show all served in tiny porcelain cups. You'll be slipping into that role tonight, strolling just outside the city's palace walls, except instead of gold-embroidered robes, you're wearing something a bit more practical. Don't worry, won't judge, though the silk merchants might. Asterisk now. Before we dive belly first into bubbling coffee pots, a small warning, you probably wouldn't survive this, at least not comfortably. For one, Ottoman-era coffee houses had a reputation for turning even the most quiet soul into a midnight philosopher. Sleep schedules, obliterated, digestive systems, let's call them. And if you didn't like crowds, well, good luck. The palace courtyard was quiet compared to the volume inside these places. Asterisk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Asterisk. And while you're at it, leave a quick comment below with your location and the local time. I love knowing whether you're listening while birds chirp outside your window, or while your city sleeps under a neon glow. Asterisk now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk. The air clings to you as you step out into Istanbul's late-night streets. It's warm, scented with grilled fish, cooked by the Bosporus, and no small amount of horse sweat from carriages rattling past. Above, the moon looks almost theatrical, hanging like a polished silver medallion over the domes and You walk slowly, because rushing in this city is almost offensive to the rhythm. Istanbul bustles by daylight, but after dark, something peculiar happens. It lowers its voice, just down to a whisper. A hush that isn't silence, so much as an invitation. Asterisk. Your sandals slide over uneven cobbles, polished by centuries of slow shuffling steps. Somewhere close, laughter bubbles full, hearty, the kind you'd hear spilling out from a tavern doorway. Except here, it isn't liquor fueling the fun. It's coffee. Rich, bitter, foamy coffee. A drink so powerful, sultans themselves issued decrees to control it, then revoked them, then tried again, realizing by about decree number 12 that coffee was here to stay. Historians still wonder if the bans were about caffeine chaos, or simply bad vibes toward gossip getting too loud. Either way, the drink had one. Asterisk. You follow the perfume of roasted beans, thick and earthy, tangling its way down the street, like a rope pulling you forward. It's not shy. It's louder in its own way than the mullah's call, or the clatter of wagon wheels. You can feel the smoke reach your lungs like it's nudging you. Yes, keep walking. It's worth it. Think of the scent like the world's most persuasive marketing campaign. One that doesn't need posters, just a breeze. Asterisk. Arriving at the small square. Lanterns like fireflies balance on posts, casting puddles of amber across the street. Cats dart between shadows, pausing long enough to glare at you for trespassing into what they clearly believe is their empire. Somewhere to your left, a lute lightly strums, barely audible over the hum of voices gathering in a single, glowing door. Asterisk. There it is, the Ottoman coffee house. To us now, it looks simple. Wooden door frames, tiled roof lines, smoke slinking out of vents. But to a tired apprentice, a traveling merchant, or a poet nursing too many ideas to keep bottled, this little hub was as irresistible as our modern coffee chains. Except this one didn't close at 9 p.m. and didn't charge for oat milk. Coffee houses here thrummed nearly around the clock, with seats filling until the streets themselves became overflow rooms. Some Ottoman writers swore that people showed up after work only to stumble home at sunrise. Still buzzing. Asterisk. You pause for a moment outside. It's warm enough that you can feel the heat radiating from the crowd inside, carried out in gusts each time the door swings open. And oh, the noise. This is not the still, polite cafe of our daydreams. This is coffee in its full caffeinated glory, men arguing about poetry, about taxes, about who owes whom money for the game last night. Each laugh seems to punch the walls like it owns them. The funniest part. A few steps from this door, the Imperial Palace lies still, quiet. Behind thick walls, incense curls in silence. Palatial halls echo with nothing but the faint shuffle of servants' slippers. And yet here, on this ordinary corner, humanity is thrumming so loudly it makes royalty look boring. Asterisk. The history books confirm it. Coffee houses were the democratic pulse of the Ottoman city. Everyone who squeezed in brought something from their life. Merchants offering rumors. Poets licking wounds through verse. Fishermen unloading stories more dramatic than their catch. And just imagine the tension when people from every walk of life gather, lounging on low cushions, sipping the same drink, regardless of status. Well, for the sultans, it was both terrifying and thrilling. Power thrives on separation, but coffee thrives on connection. That was the tricky bit. Asterisk, you hover on the threshold for a beat longer, tracing the carved wood doorframe with your fingertips. It's rough, but smoothed on parts where untold numbers of hands reached, opened, pushed, and entered before you. You wondered if some of those people feel the same nerves, that same bubbling anticipation, a desire to join, but also the curious thought, what will I say once I'm inside? Asterisk, historians still wonder whether all this noise was planned or spontaneous. Some accounts see coffee houses as carefully staged hosts, curating musicians, storytellers, debates like part of a menu. Others insist it happened organically, like lightning in a bottle. Either way, the combined voices within didn't just pass nighttime hours, they shaped public opinion. One sip, one sigh, one sarcastic quip at a time. Asterisk, you'd be out of place here, if not for the universe's forgiving imagination. This is not a scene made for our quiet WIF-dependent world, but as you stand in the doorway, preparing to enter, the crowd makes room in its way. The smoke shifts willingly, and the roasted bean aroma clings to you like a shawl. You've arrived. Istanbul's nighttime heartbeat pulses around you. Asterisk, the first step inside awaits. The instant you cross that threshold, it hits you like walking nose first into a roasted wall of beans. The smell isn't shy. It's proud, loud, and enveloping, like an ancestor of espresso shouting, "I was here first." There is no denying you've stepped inside a world fueled by caffeine's early empire. Somewhere, a small copper pot called a soothe is singing over a charcoal brazier, its belly swelling with foam that rises like a stubborn tide. Asterisk, the drink at the center of all this. The legendary Ottoman brew was a marvel of simplicity. Just water, coffee, and sometimes sugar, boiled slowly, never rushed. The foam itself was prized, almost ceremonial, like a crown perched above the dark liquid. The cup it came in was comically small, by modern standards. Porcelain thimbles, hardly bigger than the rim of your palm. If you're used to venti mega lattes, this delicate demitasse looks like bait for a mouse. Some Ottoman poets joked that if you wanted more coffee, you'd need to drink faster because the cup was finished by the time you noticed it. Asterisk, the roasting itself, that's what you've been following. A young apprentice, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, is doing laps between the grinder and the brazier like it's an Olympic sport. He stirs the beans until they pop like firecrackers, releasing that sharp, grounding aroma that's been lacing the entire street. A cloud of roasted brown settles on his skin and clothes. He probably doesn't know it yet, but he's going to smell like a walking coffee sack for the rest of his life. Honestly, there are worse fates. Asterisk, you stand near the corner and catch a glimpse of the process. The mortar and pestle crushed beans into such fine dust that it looks like cocoa powder, silky and delicate. Every grain matters. One slip, and you ruin the foam. The old men sitting at the counter eye each demitasse with the same seriousness usually applied to financial contracts. They don't clap when the apprentice succeeds, but their silence itself is approval. In Ottoman coffee houses, a ruined foam counted almost as badly as gossiping about the wrong sultan within earshot. And indeed, foam pride ran deep. Some records claim coffee houses competed over whose foam stretched tallest, clinging stubbornly to the rim of the cup. Imagine a contest where your reputation hinges on bubbles not collapsing too soon. You might laugh, but coffee loyalty was intense. Once a patron decided one house had the better brew, they'd return night after night, dragging neighbors in like missionaries for the one true cup. A gentler laugh bubbles up behind you, paired with the scratch of a lute string. The musician has paused mid-song to tease a newcomer who dares swallow his coffee in one great gulp without savoring it. Someone else chimes in, a grinning fellow across the room, mocking how modern that looked. The house gets a short, collective chuckle, the kind that welcomes strangers by making them the butt of gentle jokes. You're not excluded. If you lifted your cup too fast, you'd be next. But here, ridicule feels like affection baked in foam. Along one table, a gentleman in scholarly robes stirs his demitasse, not with a spoon, but with a cinnamon stick whittled thin. The air occasionally carries a spiced plume past your nose, soft and warming. Was cinnamon Ottoman coffee's best friend? Maybe? Was it rare, expensive, and flaunted here as proof of taste? Absolutely. Historians still wonder if these flourishes of spice were part tradition or part carefully designed status theater. Maybe both. A young boy, no older than 9, shuffles from table to table, balancing a tray of empty cups. Every time he passes you, he grins, partly from nerves, partly because this role is the dream gig of boys his age. Working in a coffee house meant touching the edges of every story, every song, every argument in the city. He's soaking in wisdom, even as his tray tips precariously too close to disaster. The crowd watches, amused perhaps, secretly waiting for the comedy of a clattering crash. For now though, his status. The Ottoman brew is not a quiet drink. Even without words, the cup seems to vibrate with energy. It's bitter, designed to snap the tongue awake. If you imagine sipping it while half asleep, think again. You'll be sitting upright within seconds, pupils adjusting like lantern wicks in full flame. No wonder these houses made Courtyard seem quieter. One cup, and your laugh grows louder, your joke more elaborate, your argument more unstoppable. Scholars today believe coffee fueled major political discussions here. But honestly, it probably fueled jokes about who snores loudest on the divan. 2. Outside the wooden shutters, the city still moves hoofbeats on stone, wind whining against roof tiles, cats ignoring everyone's exhaustion. But in here, time softens. The roasting, boiling, pouring, all beat like a drum, and the roasted scent fills your lungs as if it's carved itself into your memory already. You tilt your face toward it, and it clings the way warm bread clings to air in a modern kitchen, comforting, irresistible, forever tied to the idea of welcome. And though you are still adjusting, blinking against smoke, leaning into laughter that isn't quite yours yet, you begin to realize you belong here, now, not through your robe or your coins, but through the simple act of inhaling roasted beans deeply, as though that, alone, made you local. Coffee, after all, demands belonging. It hooks you one sip at a time and decides for you. Your demitasse hasn't arrived yet, but somehow the taste already lingers at the back of your tongue. Section 3 *. The glow inside the coffee house feels like stepping into the belly of a lantern. Shadows flicker across plaster walls, and the air hums with warmth not just from heat, but from the collective buzz of everyone wedged into the room. You glance around, getting your bearings. It's not spacious by any means. The benches curve in low lines against the walls, padded with tired cushions that smell faintly of wool and smoke. People squeeze elbow to elbow, the kind of closeness that instantly teaches you whether your neighbor just had garlic for dinner. You shuffle toward an empty corner. If empty can be defined as a space small enough that your knees nearly meet a stranger's. They nod politely, neither inviting nor denying. In Ottoman coffee houses, space belongs to no one and everyone. The smoke trails above your head like decorative curtains. And then, like in every social gathering since time began, you must figure out what to do with your hands. You tuck them across your lap, then on the table, then back over your lap. Eventually, a steaming cup rescues you. The arrival of the coffee. The apprentice from earlier sets it down with surprising grace, not spilling a drop. The cup is light enough you might mistake it for fragile porcelain decoration on some noble's shelf. But it's warm, and human warmth is exactly what you need here. Foam clings to the rim, golden brown and shining in the glow, for a drink with no sugar mound, no whipped topping, no caramel drizzle. It looks decadent. You lift it cautiously. The crowd doesn't exactly hush to watch you, but you sense the invisible weight of tradition pressing on the angle of your wrist. This isn't the time for enormous gulps that would come later in the West. Here, coffee is meant for tiny, deliberate sips. You place the demitasse to your lips, tilt slightly, and it's strong, very strong. Bitter in the best possible way. Coating your tongue like an argument it refuses to lose. Heat runs down into your chest, unrolling itself like a carpet. You feel taller somehow, though that might be your imagination. And suddenly, the laughter around you makes more sense, as though this brew has unlocked a frequency your ears didn't know existed. The stranger pressed close on your left chuckles, shaking his head. He mutters something about tourists under his breath, though surely he knows you're hardly one of the caravans passing through. Maybe he's teasing after all. Teasing is half the language here. Ottoman coffee houses thrived on gentle ribbing, trading jabs until the air was so thick with laughter that arguments disappeared into smoke. To your right. Men lean in earnest toward one another, hands sketching the outlines of imagined palaces in the air. Their words slither toward your ears. It's impossible not to notice, because every thread of conversation in here bleeds into another. Some whisper about the Sultan's new tax, others about the Janissaries and their poor pay. You sip again, the bitterness distracting you just enough to mask the nervous thrill that such conversations invite. Historians agree that coffee houses were never just about the brew. They were also, undeniably, marketplaces of opinion. What the mosque could not hold, what the courts would not permit, found its way into these smoky rooms. You can't help but wonder, did the sultans themselves ever slip in with a hood drawn close? Did they want to eavesdrop on the opinions floating over foamy cups? Historians still wonder. Some chronicles mention spies sent to monitor chatter, but there is no doubt gossip outpaced surveillance every time. The music seeps back into your ears, someone plucking a lute string like it's coaxing your pulse into tempo. The rhythm fits the room, relaxed but measured. With every strum, the chatter rises in waves. One moment sharp with energy, the next easing back into soft murmurs. You find yourself riding those waves, breathing with them like shallow tides. And then you notice. Games. The two men across from you have produced a backgammon board, tossing dice and clicking counters with confident thuds. You are half expecting tension and conspiracy, but instead, here they are, arguing over a roll of the dice as if it were They laugh, scowl, cheer, and then wave the entire thing away with the arrival of a new brew. You realize, politics and games share equal tables here. The longer you sit, the more your senses adjust. The earlier chaos separates into clear strands: coffee scent, lute string, dice clatter, foam-laden sips, smoke curling against wood. Barely a half hour ago, the palace courtyard loomed large in your imagination, imposing and stiff. But here, pillows sagging, mugs steaming, strangers laughing with closed eyes, it feels obvious. This is the real center of the city. This is where stories heighten, where worries break down, where energy swells. Asterisk, you cross your legs, relax into it. The stranger at your left lifts his demitasse, tilts it lazily toward you in a wordless toast. Without overthinking, you mirror him, and with that, you realize now you're part of the glow. The steam from the cup curls upward, lazy and deliberate, like it knows you're watching. For a moment, you simply hold it in your hands, the heat pressed against your palms. Some scholars write treatises. You cradled coffee like a small lantern. Around you, people sip, pause, sigh, and repeat. It's less like drinking a beverage and more like slipping into a ritual, a ceremony with no temple, but endless devotion. Asterisk, you tilt the cup and let a longer sip pass your lips. The foam clings, stubborn as a child, refusing to leave the playground, even after the drink beneath has begun its descent. The taste is complex, slightly smoky, slightly earthy, with a bitter edge that feels sharper than anything in modern cafes. Here, bitterness isn't accidental, it's the point. The drink trains the tongue to embrace what, at first, feels unwelcoming, and that's possibly the most Ottoman lesson of them all. Stay long enough, and what was bitter begins to hum with comfort. Asterisk, someone across the room waves dramatically at the apprentice, pointing at his half-finished cup, as though the apprentice should apologize for its emptiness. The boy rolls his eyes dramatically, too, then stumbles back to the brazier. Clearly theater is included with the coffee. Asterisk, and there's method in the serving process. Coffee isn't rushed here. Each portion is boiled in copper-cessed pots, placed over a charcoal flame until the foam swells to the rim. Timing is everything. Too soon, and the drink is weak. Too late, and bitterness scorches the tongue into mutiny. A skilled coffee maker depends as much on instinct as on the flame itself. Lifting the pot just at the moment before the foam spills over, catching it like a circus act. Watching it, you half expect applause. Asterisk, foam pride carries cultural significance. In some accounts, a suitor's worth was judged by how well he could brew. Imagine that. Centuries before dating apps, your romantic odds rose or fell, depending on bubble stability. Historians still wonder whether those households really valued flavor, or whether the foam was simply a handy metaphor for reliability. Maybe both. After all, nothing says trustworthy spouse material quite like look at the man's consistency. Asterisk, the man beside you leans over, whispering advice. He tells you to let the liquid rest after each sip, so the grounds can settle. Otherwise, you'll end with a thick sludge at the bottom that no amount of polite nodding can disguise. You thank him. He nods with satisfaction, clearly pleased to have saved you from a rookie mistake. Coffee etiquette is as much about saving face as saving your taste buds. Asterisk, and then, predictably, debates begin. Not heated enough to boil over, but strong enough to make you stay alert. One man insists coffee is better unsweetened, its bitterness a testament to fortitude. Another swears that even a spoonful of sugar elevates it like poetry rising from rhyme. A third claims cinnamon is superior. They glance at you, the newcomer, for a tie-breaking opinion. You blank. Rookie mistake again. In true Ottoman spirit, you smile, sip in silence, and let the foam answer for you. Asterisk, music drifts in again, a quiet lute paired with the feathery clack of an oud. The sound curves through the room like another layer of foam over everything. The players do not demand your applause. They only provide rhythm, the way waves drum against a shoreline, not expecting, but offering. Some people listen closely, some talk louder over it. But you find yourself aligning breaths with the notes. Asterisk, the ritual expands beyond taste. Once the last sip drains, there's a new game on the table, fortune-telling with coffee grounds. One woman near you tilts her empty demitasse upside down into its saucer, letting the leftover grounds tumble into strange, blotched patterns. She stares at them like they hold volumes of hidden stories. Her friend leans across, whispers, then bursts into laughter. Perhaps the cup predicted wealth, or love, or maybe it just predicted she'd trip later on her way home. But the atmosphere shifts slightly as laughter, but also reverence. In these grounds, people found excuses to wonder aloud about futures untold. Asterisk historians still wonder who truly invented coffee divination. Was it rooted in Ottoman customs? Or did it waft in, like spices, from further east? No one can quite agree. But no one denies the popularity. Here where gossip and song swirled together, even the dregs of a cup became invitations to dream. Asterisk, you glanced back at your own cup. Its contents are dwindling, leaving an inky residue that clings to the porcelain like tiny brushstrokes. Maybe, later, you'll tilt your cup, like the woman did, pretend to see patterns too. For now, you sip again, feeling the strange intimacy of being one more shadow in this humble, glowing room. The taste is still bitter, but now it feels like home. Asterisk, and while the palace slumbers quietly in its formality, the ritual here insists on noisiness, on bubbling pots and laughter, on conversations that cluster and scatter all at once. You lean back into your cushion, foam lingering on your lips like punctuation, reminding you you're part of the story now. Asterisk, the ritual continues, and so do you. The first thing you notice, once your tongue has surrendered to the taste of foam and bitterness, is that the sound in the room has shifted. Louder, sharper, more pointed. You lean back slightly, letting the chatter settle into your ears. It's not harmless tavern talk, not entirely. It's politics whispered, chuckled, disguised with a cough now and then. Asterisk, two men at the far bench lean so close together, their foreheads almost bump. Their hands wiggle through the air like featherless birds, drawing invisible maps of Istanbul's streets. One mutters about new rules on taxation, thick with irritation, while the other laughs, saying the government couldn't organize a breadline if it tried. The laugh is careful, though, the kind that skates one step shy of peril. Here in the coffee house, words flowed more freely than wine, and gossip didn't stay tucked away. Asterisk, historians tell us quite unanimously that Ottoman coffeehouses were like proto-parliaments, places where politics percolated right alongside the brew. Sultan after sultan tried to clamp down on them, knowing that too many cups meant too many opinions. But bans never lasted. Coffee had better survival instincts than law. Still, you'd be wise not to repeat these jokes outside. Inside, their community. Outside, their heresy. Asterisk, your neighbor on the bench sighs, clearly unbothered by the political thread and plunging headfirst into a different one. He leans toward you, voice low, to share a piece of neighborhood gossips. Something about a merchant caught watering down his sesame oil. The scandal. You nod solemnly, though you're not sure exactly why sesame oil adulteration feels so dramatic. Yet here, framed by laughter and smoke, it becomes headline-worthy. Asterisk, a young scholar interrupts the cafe's rhythm by slamming down a page of poetry, declaring that the Sultan himself needs this verse for inspiration. He reads aloud, tripping only once, and his audience half claps, half mocks, declaring the rhyme passable at best. He bows anyway. It seems poetry in this room is equal parts performance and wrestling match. Asterisk, a storyteller, perched on his bench like a fisherman with words for bait, begins weaving a tale pulled from the marketplace about a ship lost at sea, maybe, or about a donkey that refused to bow to its new master. It doesn't matter if the story is real. Truth is a flexible guest here. The charm is in how it explodes into laughter when he reaches the punchline, turning the donkey into the master of stubborn Istanbul itself. Asterisk, the whole place shakes with delight, slapping knees, clinking cups, sighs thick with caffeinated breath. The air is full and warm enough that, if you close your eyes, it may well be the sound of a family at an oversized dinner table. Then again, it's also not so far from chaos. Asterisk, you can't help but marvel. One building, a dozen stone walls and plaster, resounds louder than the palace itself. The palace, with its endless guards, tries to control stories. This little hut practically breeds them. Which has more power? Historians still wonder if the government saw coffee houses as dangerous seeds or as harmless venting. One night of gossip may be just chatter, but 1,000 nights, that could shape minds more than any decree. Asterisk. And of course, not everything is serious. Off in the corner, two classmates bicker about who broke whose sandals. Across the bench, a man tells anyone who listened that his cat deserves more respect than most officials. Another insists that his rooster crows in perfect iambic pentameter. Everyone rolls their eyes, but they laugh, because why not? Coffee sharpens tongues the way whetstones sharpen knives. Sometimes the glint is sharp, sometimes just shiny. Asterisk. Your own cup is nearly empty now. The bitter echo remains across your teeth, but your ears drink just as deeply. These aren't speeches carved into stone. They're fleeting, foamy, scattered, yet they're thick with companionship. And you, pressed elbow to elbow with strangers, feel the gentle thrill of conspiratorial laughter, the caffeinated heartbeat of a city talking louder than its palace ever dared. Asterisk. The murmurs spin on, louder and softer, like the tides of a sea that never sleeps. Asterisk. The chatter softens, just briefly, as lantern light dims toward the far wall. A new hum unfurls, one you hadn't fully noticed before the faint squeak of rods. The flicker of shadows stretching taller than they have any right to. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust, and then you see it. The unmistakable comedy show of the Ottoman night, the shadow puppets. Asterisk. This isn't just entertainment. It's a ritual nestled right into the heart of the coffee house, weaving storytelling and satire into smoky air. The puppeteer crouches behind a white cloth screen, lamps glowing hot, fingers busy with leather figures cut so finely, it looks as though each detailed turban, even crooked eyebrows, had been carved from patience itself. He raises them, presses them to the glow, and the shadows spring alive. Asterisk. The crowd leans forward. The laughter hushes into anticipation. Even though everyone has seen this before, they are enthralled again. And you're grateful for the chance to slip deeper into the room's rhythm. Asterisk. On the screen, two silhouettes argue in exaggerated voices. You recognize them right away. Karags, the sharp-tongued everyman, and Hasavat, the overly polite foil. Their banter is fast, slippery, and guaranteed to cause at least one belly laugh before the scene ends. Karags speaks bluntly, saying what no one is supposed to say, tripping over insults with endearing clumsiness. Hasavat counters with flowery phrases, elegant on the surface, but nonsensical at their root. Together, they're the mirror and mockery of Ottoman daily life. Asterisk. A sharp jab at politicians sneaks into the dialogue, disguised as a joke about how many roosters it takes to feed the army. The room roars with laughter. Even those who cover their mouths can't stop shoulders from shaking. It's safe, you realize. Talking openly about rulers might draw the wrong ear, but making puppets say the same? That's art. That's allowed. Historians still debate. Were these puppet shows harmless comic release, or subtle acts of resistance, fueling critical thought under the mask of play? Asterisk. Karags interrupts Hasavat mid-sentence, slapping him so hard his shadow wiggles off-center. The audience explodes, cups nearly tipping. The puppet wobbles dramatically, limbs flailing in impossible arcs, and for a moment you could swear the shadow itself was laughing too. You glance around. It's infectious. Even the stern scholar, who moments ago corrected someone's coffee divination technique, is bent double with mirth. Asterisk. And here's the charm. This isn't grand theater. There are no velvet curtains or gilded balconies. Just cloth, lamplight, and skilled hands. Yet it grips the room tighter than palatial music halls ever could. The puppeteer mutters quietly to himself as he switches characters, bending voices from squeaky to booming to nasal, crafting entire worlds with shadows alone. Asterisk. Next, A guest character appears, a Greek merchant with a ridiculously oversized nose. Not far behind, a pompous Arab traveler who mistakes prayer time for pie time. Yes, stereotypes you'd raise a brow at today, but here, comedy thrives on exaggeration. The audience howls, and within the laughter, you hear affection, not cruelty. Each figure is as familiar as an old neighbor, teased for quirks everyone already knows. Asterisk, a boy sitting near your table leans across, whispering like a co-conspirator. "The Sultan banned this once," he says, eyes wide. You murmur back, "Really?" He nods. Not long. People missed it. And then he grins, spilling the family secret. "My uncle says Karog's is braver than most generals." You smile. Perhaps that's true. Asterisk, the puppets continue. Now Karog stumbles across a fish market, mistaking an eel for a mustache. The crowd erupts once more. Even the cat winding between the benches lifts its ears as though amused. Cups clink, foam trembles. For a few minutes, even politics pauses. People here, across languages and statuses, share the simple joy of laughing together at shadows. Asterisk, and you sit quietly, body sinking deeper into the cushion, warmth rolling through your chest. Oddly enough, a puppet made of flat leather has brought you closer to these neighbors than any sentence in the room could. Humor is thick among them like steam from the cess, and you realize you were already part of this story before they noticed your presence. Asterisk. The scene ends with Hazavat singing himself into a trapdoor, Karag's cheering his misfortune. The lights flicker, and the crowd claps not loudly, not like a theater curtain call, but softly, respectfully, like pouring cream into milk. You take another sip of your coffee, now cooled but richer somehow. The foam is fading, but the aftertaste lingers like applause against the top of your mouth. Asterisk, the puppets rest backstage. The crowd refills their cups, and in you grows a quiet certainty that even shadows leave long impressions. The puppets rest. Conversations loosen again, like strings untied, and the small boy with the tray shuffles past you with the concentration of a tightrope walker balancing castles on his platter. The smoke has thickened, the roasting never stops, and with each swirl, the room feels more like a dream, one scented entirely with roasted beans and stale shawl fabric. For a moment, you think that's all the entertainment for the evening, but then like a sigh feathered through wood, the music begins again. Asterisk, a musician, seated cross-legged on a cushion near the corner, cradles a lute, not the grand, flashy kind you'd see painted in palatial portraits, but a humble one, wood polished from years of being held. He plucks at the strings, gently at first, then with a rhythm that reverberates through the soles of your sandals. The tune meanders half song, half conversation. Before long, a hand drum picks up, tapping like footsteps on the street outside. Someone in the back whistles a harmony. The entire room exhales with it. Asterisk, this is not concert hall precision. It's more honest than that. The players slip in and out of tempo, laughing when the drummer falls behind, or when someone's string twangs off-key. The laughter doesn't stop the playing, in fact, it weaves right inside it. You can't help thinking it's the Ottoman version of your friend insisting that off-key karaoke still counts as art. The sound may wobble, but the laughter carries it further than perfection ever could. Asterisk, you take another sip. The music doesn't speed you up. It slows you down, like a lull designed specifically for bones. The room shifts from bubbling chatter to melodic sway. Patrons soft shout to one another, but you notice they half-time their words with the lutes. Rhythm, it's contagious. Like a heartbeat everyone unconsciously follows. Asterisk, the man next to you nudges your arm, pointing his chin toward a second player joining Enon. Old man hunched as though the oud he carries weighs a small kingdom. His fingers, though, are nimble. They flutter across the frets with a confidence that betrays decades of nightly practice. Each pluck feels like a polished stone dropped on a lake, ripples spreading to every ear here. The younger musician leans into him, smiling, recognizing he's been eclipsed. But the audience? They're thrilled, and their cups still clink along. Asterisk. Historians note that coffee houses were some of the safest places for music. The mosque had structure, the palace had pomp, but coffee houses allowed sound to breathe. It thrived here because it didn't have to impress an important ear. These nights were about embracing imperfection, improvisation, joy in its rawest form. And those tunes, they often lingered, winding their way out the shutters, spilling into the alleys, until you could hear them echoing against the Bosporus like lullabies disguised as protests. Asterisk. Your own shoulders start to release tension without you noticing. The vibration from the drum feels like a soft massage pressed through the wood of your bench. You imagine the foam in your cup trembling like a miniature dance floor. Asterisk. Then comes the real treat. A singer, not with pomp, but casually, as if his throat was another instrument conveniently lying around. He leans back, eyes half shut, voice curling up the walls. His song, a ballad about losing a fish at market, tragic comedy at its peak. He cries out for the poor carp that escaped his basket, and the audience responds with It's hilarious, ridiculous even, but it fills the night with notes drawn longer than the laughter. Asterisk. And beneath the comedy, something lingers. The cadence rings out a little sadness you didn't expect. You wonder if this is what Ottoman music did. Best trap sorrow and satin laughter, so no one noticed until they felt it buzzing down in their ribs. Asterisk. Historians still wonder whether these tunes were meant to survive, or if they lived only a night, vanishing like smoke by morning. Nothing was written, only carried by memory. So if the singer never returned, if the old oud faltered, maybe those melodies simply slipped away with the smoke from the brazier. That thought adds a subtle sweetness to the moment. You are, fleetingly, in it. Here, now, part of sound and cup, shadow and foam. Asterisk. The audience claps along in uneven rhythm. You try clapping too, but your hands don't blend. The man beside you smirks, shaking his head clearly. Your rhythm is an outsider. You shrugged, laughing softly, and returned to sipping instead. That, at least, you're learning to do properly. Asterisk. The musicians continue. The room buzzing not from caffeine alone, but from tones stitched together like patchwork, hums and sways. And you, lulled, warm, amused, can't help but think, this is what it must have meant to feel alive in Istanbul at midnight, centuries ago. Asterisk. And the lute strums on. Asterisk. Asterisk. The lute strums fade, not with an ending so much as with a shrug, like the instruments have decided they're tired of holding the room's attention. People murmur quieter now, laughter giving way to concentration. The reason soon reveals itself. A backgammon board is slapped down on a cushion, dice rattling in a little wooden bowl, with such confidence you'd think the game controlled the entire empire. Asterisk. You lean forward, as if you were invited. The board is beautiful, carved from walnut, its surface lovingly polished by more fingers than anyone could count. The ivory counters gleamed faintly in the lantern light. This isn't a haphazard match. This is sport, art, ritual, and possibly existential combat. Within seconds, everyone suddenly becomes an expert. Patrons crane their necks, offering unsolicited strategies. Some clap for every roll. Others mutter TSK. TSK as though the dice offended fate itself. Asterisk. The two players sit stone-faced, but their eyes betray sparks of competition. Each roll rattles the dice like thunder. Checkers slam hard against wood, not gently, the crack echoing like a small drumbeat no musician could keep up with, and every move drags gasps, protests, even applause from the gallery. Asterisk. One player mutters slyly about having to carry the weight of luck and intelligence too. His rival scoffs, declaring his moves are blessed by angels, who clearly prefer winners. You can't tell whether they've been friends for decades, or hated rivals pretending it's civility. Truthfully, in Ottoman coffee houses, both states looked nearly identical. Asterisk, why backgammon? Historians know it as an ancient pastime, a game older than Istanbul itself. Carried from Persia, centuries earlier, along the Silk Roads of trade, but here, inside this smoky cafe, it's transformed no longer abstract patterns of counters, but a chance for the community to pour all their pent-up wit and caffeine into one rolling pair of dice. Most nights, stakes were small. Pride, mockery, bragging rights. And yet, you can almost imagine these men betting fortunes, wives, even kingdoms. More likely, a week's worth of coffee. Asterisk still, there's tension. A gasp rings out as one counter is hit, banished to the middle bar, the dreaded exile. The crowd seethes, shouting wild strategies that even the players ignore, because what is a proper game without backseat generals? You catch yourself leaning in, invested. Fortunately, no one notices your grin. It'd give you away as a rookie unable to hide fascination at something routine. Asterisk, the boy with the tray keeps circling, pausing just long enough to peek. He pretends not to care, but you can see his eyes linger, tracking moves as if he already plays at dawn behind the building, training in secret. Perhaps someday he'll lean his elbows wide across this same board, confident enough to slam down pieces like thunder. You smile at the thought. Someday, the empire of dice will be his. Asterisk, and just as the tension swells too thick, the older player coughs dramatically, rolling just enough to finish his board and win. His rival pretends indignation that fools mortals of your persuasion, then smiles, leaning back while the crowd bursts into laughter. A performance, not just a game. Everyone knew it, and somehow, the crowd loves the show more than the scoreboard. Asterisk historians still wonder, were backgammon matches in coffee houses more about the game or the gathering? Was it really competition that fueled people, or the excuse to slam counters hard enough that the palace could probably hear it echo against the walls? All agree no night was complete without the clatter. Asterisk, but backgammon wasn't the only pastime. Decks of playing cards shuffle at another table. Men lean over nard, another ancient cousin of dice. In every corner of the cafe, it's as though rest is forbidden. Your neighbors refuse to let their hands sit still. Cups, counters, dice, instruments, all must be used. Touched, rolled, slammed. Energy hangs in the air, jittery yet comforting, like childlike motion disguised as adult tradition. Asterisk, you lean back into your cushion, sip that last bitter trace of coffee, and realize this isn't just entertainment for an idle night. It's practice, a kind of training ground in patience, wit, and the art of losing cheerfully, which, given the Empire's turbulent history, might be the most valuable skill on offer tonight. Asterisk, the clatter fades. Winners shrugged like sages. Losers grin like philosophers who never cared for victory anyway. And for the rest of the room, they've loved the miniature theater every roll produced. Asterisk, the dice still seem to rattle faintly in your ears, even after the board is put away.
The dice clatter slowly ebbs, and with it, the room breathes differently. Laughter yields to a hush that feels like dusk settling over the sea. It's not silence, never silence here, but a gentler cadence, marked by the low murmur of voices that carry less boast and more thought. A trio of men, robes draped like folded parchment, lean closer together, scrolls and scraps of paper balanced on the tabletop as though they've smuggled in pieces of the library itself. Asterisk, scholars. You realize, or at least men who aspire to be heard like scholars. The coffee house wasn't just for games and gossip. It was also the city's public lecture hall, free of tuition but full of interruptions. You shift your weight, listening quietly. Asterisk, one of them reads a line of poetry, Persian, lofty, and lilting. He pauses mid-verse to explain its meaning, gesturing with one hand while the other keeps his demitasse steady. His companions nod solemnly. Then, inevitably, one tilts back his head, scoffing as though the poetry insulted his grandmother. "It's stale," he says. These thoughts have been written for 100 years. The first, undeterred, jabs his finger at the word, insisting that truth doesn't expire. Asterisk. The debate grows tenderly heated. Patrons nearby lean in, pretending to sip more slowly, ears hanging on every phrase. You realize you're among what might be called the earliest study circles. Though here, the curriculum is carried in steam and laughter rather than walls of stone. Asterisk. It's a fascinating paradox. Outside, scholars wore formal robes, taught in madrasas, lectured within structures of hierarchy. But inside these walls, hierarchy collapses like a poorly built divan. The apprentice boy can hear the same ideas as a court official, the fisherman the same as a palace scribe. Some even whispered, nervously but curiously, that the very fabric of social order trembled with each lecture given over coffee phone. Historians still argue, did these cafe debates shape society? Or were they just lively echoes, bouncing around until morning erased them? Asterisk. The older player, now sitting with his instrument asleep beside him, raises an eyebrow with faint amusement. He probably hears this every night. He probably knows that tonight's debate is the recycled cousin of yesterday's. Still, he seems entertained by the performance. Asterisk. Another man joins. He doesn't argue, he scribbles instead. Quietly, he dips his reed pen, sliding ink across his scrap of paper. You tilt to peek. His writing is fast and uneven, recording fragments. Maybe poetry, maybe philosophies, maybe gossip disguised as wisdom. Or maybe it's nothing more than caffeine-fueled doodles of lopsided camels. You can't be sure. What you can be sure of is that he values it enough to keep. Asterisk. Someone off to the side raises a question. Did coffee sharpen the mind, or scatter it? He laughs as he asks, but a thoughtful silence follows. It is undeniable, the drink infused debates with vigor. But was it clarity or chaos? Historians still wonder. Perhaps both at once. Judging by tonight, you sense the balance tips depending on the thirst of the thinker. Asterisk, your seat grows more comfortable as the scholars continue, arguing around the cosmos like boys skipping stones across the Bosporus. They leap from astronomy to theology, from grammar to ethics, circling back again. Occasionally, the conversation slows, punctuated by sips of black liquid, tiny pauses, where the bitter taste steadies their thoughts before the next outburst. Asterisk. One scholar proudly insists that the stars above predict the empire's fortune, mapping destiny onto the glittering dome of night. Another counters sharply, reminding him that fortune lies not in stars, but in choices, particularly the choice of whether to refill one's cup. Asterisk. The laughter spreads again. Arguments carry conviction, but no true malice. Swords are absent here. Words suffice. Caffeine fuels the courage to speak with sharper edges than one might dare in daylight. And yet, those edges are softened by company and cushions, by the act of sitting shoulder to shoulder in a place with no throne, no pulpit, only smoke and shared cups. Asterisk, it dawns on you. This is perhaps the most revolutionary piece of the Ottoman coffee house. Beyond gossip, shadow puppets, backgammon boards, here was a room where ideas mingled without border guards, where station was less visible than the size of your cup. And if the Sultan worried, perhaps it was not about the laughter or the games, but about thought itself moving faster than decree. Asterisk, your own cup, empty again, clinks softly onto its saucer. A refill appears before you even realize how. You murmur thanks, sip once more, and feel the quiet thrill of being among minds in motion. In a room louder than palaces, yet freer than any court. Asterisk, the scholars laugh again, and everyone around you exhales with them together, warmed not only by heat and bitterness, but by the daring possibility of thought unchained.
The murmurs of poetry and cosmic speculation give way to a new rhythm, not music, not clattering dice, but the exchange of voices, dripping with foreign names, distant ports, and spices that almost perfume the air just by being spoken aloud. You shift your head and notice a small knot of men merchants, clearly. Their robes are less neat than the scholars', their accents softer or rougher, depending on where their feet arrived from, but their presence is magnetic. Their hands move as if conducting invisible journeys, painting maps above steaming cups. Asterisk the topic. Not theology, not rhyme, but news. News traded the way only a merchant can trade it, as casually as coins, but carrying more value than gold. One man swears he has the freshest report from Aleppo that the caravans on the Silk Road now face delays due to disputes among local tribes. Another insists that Stale, his cousin's caravan, just arrived from Damascus yesterday, and the path beyond Anatolia is clear. Patrons lean in, ears twitching, caught like fish nibbling at bait. Coffee, after all, wasn't only bitter warmth, it powered information networks. Long before telegraphs or newspapers, these heated rooms served as bulletin boards. A merchant bragging about Yemeni beans might casually mention a new tax in Cairo. A storyteller boasting about pepper harvested on Java might slip in political tidings carried from Malabar. You can't help marveling, tonight, with no parchment, no broadcasting, no glowing screens. You're in the thick of global rumor. Asterisk your neighbor, too polite to hide curiosity, mutters to you that merchants are walking newspapers. He says you can pay them with coffee instead of coin, and they'll deliver headlines hotter than what scribes in the palace waste days writing down. Historians largely agree. Coffee houses accelerated the flow of information so efficiently that ruling powers grew nervous. Imagine sultans, accustomed to decrees moving in stately marches, suddenly finding their subjects aware of tomorrow before decree day arrived. A cup of coffee was sometimes stronger than a spyglass. Asterisk and how entertaining that news could be. A man from Bursa swears that a ship from Venice arrives stuffed with sugar. The barrels so sticky the longshoremen are still covered in it weeks later. Another retorts that sugar is overrated. Coffee's real partner is cardamom, fresh and floral, straight from Indian merchants eager to slip it into every brew. Someone else breaks in to tell of a Portuguese galleon struck by storms and limping across the Mediterranean like a soaked dog. Was it true? Perhaps, perhaps not. But with every repetition, the story grows bolder, sharper, more delicious than candied almonds. Asterisk you sip your cup quietly, marveling at how news itself seems to brew differently, depending on who tells it. Which version is correct, that of the Aleppan caravan man, or the sailor spinning storms? Historians still wonder, did these coffeehouse rumors distort truth, or did they illuminate it ahead of time? Perhaps, just like the beverage at hand, information here always had grounds at the bottom, sediment left to be interpreted by anyone brave enough to tilt the cup. Asterisk. The atmosphere shifts when a merchant unrolls a bundle of cloth silk, smooth as river water, that shimmer and lantern light. He doesn't sell it, exactly. He displays it, boasting of its Chinese origin. How many days his caravan braved deserts to bring it here. People lean close, fingers brushing the threads. For them, the cloth is evidence proof that the world is vast, yet folded neatly on their bench. A quiet hum passes through the room, part admiration, part calculation. Asterisk nearby. Two men dispute pepper prices. Their argument surprisingly earns more attention than even the shadow play earlier. A voice behind you laughs, joking that if pepper gets any dearer, they'll start seasoning meals with moon dust. Everyone chuckles. Humor softens even spice inflation. Asterisk, but beneath the humor, you notice another current. The act of gathering, hearing tales of ships, caravans, silks, and spices it, subtly knots the listeners into something greater. These patrons will stumble home tonight with more than laughter. They will carry news to their families, their neighbors, their apprentices, perhaps slightly altered, perhaps exaggerated, but undeniably carried onward. Asterisk. You peer toward the merchant's hand as it illustrates a sea route across invisible waters. The gesture alone is captivating, like a magician pulling oceans from the air, and for a second, the coffeehouse vanishes. You almost believe you are standing on ship decks. sails billowing as salt air whips across your nose. The crowd hums softly, equally entranced, sipping their bitter cups while traveling the world without ever leaving the cushion. Asterisk, you exhale, blinking back into the glow of lamps. Scholars, merchants, puppets, dice, poets. Each layer stitches itself into the same fabric. One kind of knowledge merges into another, until the place itself feels like a quilt of the empire, and everything beyond it. How ironic, you think, that a palace built of marble could feel so far away from life, while a smoke-stained room of cushions could hold the whole world on a saucer. Asterisk, and just like that, in the space of a sip, you feel your own chest quietly expand. You are part of this circulation of voices, this stretching of horizons. Tonight, coffee is more than comfort. It's a ship, a caravan, and a conversation sailing steadily into morning. The merchants, finished with their performance of markets and voyages, settle back into their cushions, refilling cups with a final clink. For a while, the air hums with softer chatter, as though the room itself is taking a slow exhale. And then you hear a different timbre rise. The voice of someone who doesn't speak like a merchant, or a scholar, or a dice player. It's deeper, stretched with years of retelling. Asterisk, a storyteller has arrived. Asterisk, he's not announced with fanfare. He simply clears his throat, and as if pulled by gravity, eyes swivel toward him. Patrons shift, leaning forward, cradling cups against knees. Even the cat creeping toward abandoned saucers pauses mid-step, as though it knows. This will be good. Asterisk, the storyteller begins, his voice carrying the rhythm of footsteps across stone streets. His tale flows effortlessly, more river than speech. And you cushioned beneath the lanterns quickly realize this is no ordinary gossip. This is history braided with myth, wound together like double-spun thread. Asterisk, he speaks of a sultan, one so besotted with his new hunting falcon that he brought it to every official meeting. He pauses, grins, and shrugs. Some said the falcon listened better than his vizier. The crowd breaks into laughter, cups clattering as shoulders shake. But the storyteller lets the moment rest only briefly before weaving in another strand. Suddenly, it's not just a falcon, but a talking bird who outsmarted the palace guards by imitating the vizier's orders. Did this happen? Almost certainly not. But in the world of coffeehouse tales, truth matters only if it also entertains. Asterisk, historians still wonder whether these nightly stories, these embroidered truths, preserved history or dressed it beyond recognition. But either way, they endured, retold from one cushion to the next, until they rooted themselves into memory more deeply than facts sometimes could. Asterisk. The storyteller shifts pace. Now it's a tale of a fisherman swept up by an unexpectedly talkative dolphin. The dolphin, naturally, criticizes the fisherman for charging too much for sea bass. Cups spill with laughter again. Someone in the back heckles, "Cheaper dolphin." Then, the storyteller nods gravely, as though taking notes on ocean economics. Asterisk, and it isn't only comedy. His voice dips quieter, drawing the crowd inward. He speaks of travelers on the Silk Road, of snowstorms in the high plateaus of Anatolia, their caravans crawling like ants across the drifts. He pauses to describe how camel bells sounded like lullabies against the wind. How, in the middle of the night, one merchant believed he saw a city of glass glowing in the distance. Was it the moonlight, a mirage, or something else altogether? Asterisk, a collective breath is held. Then, with a grin, he breaks the tension. Ah, and when he reached it, he realized it was his neighbor's mule with frost on its ears. The room bursts all at once, the atmosphere climbing back up from reverent hush to joyous eruption. Asterisk, the irony is delicious. How one voice, unadorned, unfunded, could grab hold of 100 ears more tightly than gold-plated sermons or official decrees. The empire pulsed with bureaucracy, weighty and slow. But here, Here its subjects let imaginations gallop on the back of each histrionic falcon, each talking dolphin, each caravan blurred by snow. Asterisk, somewhere in the midst of it. Your eyes catch the boy with the tray. He's abandoned his duties temporarily. Crouching behind a post, mouth open, eyes wide. Perhaps this is his education. No scroll, no ink, just uneven shadows of a man's voice stretched across imagination. He'll carry it tomorrow, retold with the confidence of someone who was there Ivan, though what he repeats will not be quite what he heard. And on the cycle goes. Asterisk, at this point, your own eyes are heavy, and not from exhaustion alone. The room's slow rhythm tugs you back and forth between caffeine's brightness and storytelling's lull. You realize your heart is beating in the same measure as the storyteller's pauses, swirling at the end of each punchline, tightening during each solemn silence, releasing when the laughter erupts. Asterisk, and so the tale continues. A journey from truth to fiction and back again, weaving myths right into daily memory like threads in fabric. That is the essence of the Ottoman night. One minute the empire feels heavy and official. The next, it's a stage for talking sea bass and stubborn donkeys. Both carry their truths in wildly different costumes. Asterisk, the storyteller bows his head when finished, a soft smile shaping his face. Applause isn't thunderous, only respectful. The sound of palms tapping lightly, like rainfall across tiled roofs. And at that moment, you feel it, that peculiar cocktail of mystery and contentment. You're part of not just a coffee house, but a story that has already retold itself hundreds of times, and will do so hundreds more. Asterisk, you sip the last dregs of your cup, bitter and silty, the taste of endings and beginnings, all in one. The storyteller's words dissolve into hums and chuckles, and the clink of cups begins again, as if the atmosphere needed a small punctuation mark. A sudden ripple of movement shifts through the room. You glance down to see it, a feline presence weaving through sandaled feet and brushing against robe hems with the entitlement of a sultan. Asterisk. Ah, yes, the inevitable coffeehouse cat. Asterisk, she struts confidently down the aisle, tail raised like a banner, ears swiveling as though she's monitoring the quality of conversation. You wonder if this is her first visit, but the smirk tugging at the nearest patron's lips tells you otherwise. This cat is no guest. This is her empire. The owner of the coffeehouse may collect coins, but the real proprietor collects saucers. Asterisk, the boy with the tray bends down, pretending to shoo her, but you can tell it's an act. She receives her nightly allowance, a small splash of leftover foam sliding into the dish. She noses it delicately, then laps it up with rapid flicks of her tongue. Given how many centuries Ottoman coffeehouses thrived, historians still wonder just how jittery these cats became after years of caffeinated offerings. Was there once a whole feline dynasty of jitterbugging, wide-eyed, midnight-hunting Ottoman cats? Perhaps we'll never know. Asterisk, the patrons watch her with the kind of affectionate tolerance reserved only for children and cats. A man tries to lure her with a sesame seed from his bread roll. She takes one sniff, looks offended, and stalks away with queenly disdain. The audience cackles. You'd think she was performing a Kellogg skit herself. Asterisk, you catch her eyes briefly, green and glowing in the lantern light. She judges you instantly, deciding whether you're worth her time. You newcomer, cushion hogger, coffee novice. Apparently, not impressive. She blinks slowly, then turns her back. The Ottoman court had its viziers, but here the cat plays judge, jury, an executioner of social status. Asterisk, a man from the far corner sighs dramatically, announcing that the cat loves him more than any other, since she once curled up in his lap during a particularly raucous political debate. The room groans and mocks, clearly familiar with the story. Someone mutters, "She sits with anyone warm. Stop pretending," and another adds, "Then again, perhaps she's simply after better poetry." The boasting man shrugs like a monarch, accepting his crown nonetheless. Asterisk, the cat, meanwhile, prances toward the exit, slipping expertly between feet. Not a single cup tips, not a single sandal trips her. Like a seasoned general, she knows both the pathways and the pulses of this place better than the people gathering in it. And sure enough, she returns 10 minutes later with all the casual air of an empress on parade. Asterisk, odd, isn't it? In a space buzzing with philosophy, shadows, lute strings, politics, and rumors of caravans. It's the little creature brushing against ankles that pulls the room into harmony. The laughter she leaves in her wake is more cohesive than backgammon victories, more unifying than merchant headlines. Asterisk. Historians note the important roles animals played in Ottoman daily life: dogs guarding streets, horses pulling majesty through parades. But cats walked their own empire. They belonged everywhere and nowhere, just like wandering stories. They offered their companionship like tips for patience, aloof, but oddly grounding. And in coffee houses, their presence gave a familiar strangeness to the swirl of constantly changing ideas. Asterisk, you follow her path for a while, sipping the last of your refill as she leaps smoothly onto a vacant bench, curling into what can only be described as performative sleep. Not tucked tightly, no legs sprawled dramatically, chin balanced on the edge as if to say, yes, the empire runs through me, and everyone accepts it. Asterisk, your own shoulders loosen further. There's something marvelous about watching cats in a crowd like this. It punctures grandeur. The world may be full of sultans issuing decrees, caravans carrying silks, storytellers bending history, but here, a cat decides the climax of the night by choosing a nap location. Asterisk, a laugh slips out of you. The man beside you glances, amused, then raises his cup. You raise yours back, though there's more ground than liquid inside. But it doesn't matter. In this moment, you are fully here, in a place where the loudest debates bow briefly to a swishing tail. Asterisk, and so the night carries on, quieter somehow, punctuated by the occasional purr drifting under the table. You begin to wonder if soft sounds might linger longer than shouts. If maybe the empire of laughter and ideas sits balanced upon the paws of a single, indifferent cat. Asterisk. The cat snores softly in its curled throne, the scattered laughter fading into the low drone of voices. It feels as if the entire house has exhaled together until the door creaks against its hinges. Cold air slinks inward with it, carrying a note of tension sharp enough that the lute player pauses mid-strum. Asterisk, you glance up. New figures step inside. They don't slump into cushions or cradle cups with familiar ease. They stand stiff, robes cleaner than most, glances sharper than arrows. Asterisk. Ah, the officials. Asterisk, they move with a polite slowness, pretending to check their sleeves, but everyone knows they are here to check you. Not you personally, but the house, the crowd, the noise itself. The chatter dies by degrees first, the gossip, then the debates. Then even the merchants find an excuse to be fascinated by their shoelaces. Instinct ripples through the coffee house like invisible choreography. Lower laughter, quieter clinks, fewer mentions of sultans and taxes. Asterisk, the authorities don't speak at first. They hover near the doorway, as if the smell of roasting beans itself might incriminate someone. One adjusts his belt, glances around. Another raises eyebrows when he notices someone's dice abandoned mid-roll on a cushion. A third leans back, scanning the room with the look of a man searching for contraband verses or treason hidden under a cushion. Asterisk. Historians tell us there were countless decrees against coffee at various points in the empire's reign. Sultans feared gossip mutating into unrest, or perhaps more likely they resented not being at the center of a louder crowd. Officials made appearances in these houses to enforce bans, confiscate cups, or sometimes simply to remind patrons that fun carried limits. And yet, it rarely worked. Close the coffee houses tonight, and tomorrow they'd reopen. Laughter louder than before. One official strides toward the brazier. His gaze lingers on the bubbling set. The apprentice stiffens, hand hovering over the ladle as though it were wealth about to be seized. But then the official only inhales. His eyes soften briefly, betraying the part of him that wants nothing more than to sip. He clears his throat, hardening again, shoving that thought down. Still, you saw the flicker of humanity beneath the robe. Maybe even they weren't immune. A patron calls out a safe question. Would you like to hear poetry, gentle masters? The room half smiles, half grimaces. Bold move. The officials exchange glances, then wave the comment away. Poetry is harmless enough, until someone slips a satire between rhymes. Everyone knows this, but no one speaks it aloud. Sometimes it's safest to choke on words than to spit them too soon. The cat stretches dramatically, yawns in the middle of the hush, and jumps down to wind between the official's legs with all the subtlety of a diplomat who knows no borders. The room holds still. One wrong step and toppled cups might look like rebellion, but the official merely huffs, nudges the cat aside gently with his boot, and mutters something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like affection. The coffeehouse chuckles nervously, the tension cracking just enough for air to flow again. The cat, smug, settles back near the brazier, as if to remind everyone who's truly untouchable here. Slowly. The officials turn toward the exit. They've done their duty, been seen, signaled presence, pressed a few shoulders flat with caution. One pauses at the door, looking back into the cushioned glow, as if he wants to stay behind. But he doesn't. He pulls the wood closed, and the noise of the street swallows him and his companions. The room exhales in jubilant relief. Cups rise, dice roll again, shadows flicker, lute strings resume, and all at once, life rushes back into the silence they left behind, like air flooding into lungs after being held far too long. Historians still wonder if these visits were to instill fear, or whether officials simply wanted to feel included in a party they weren't allowed to join. Maybe both. Either way, you realize coffeehouses survived because they were stronger than fear. Whispered words, bubbling pots, laughing shadows. Once those rhythms settle into a city, even empire walls crumble, trying to silence them. Your heart slows, soothed by the return of chatter, by the faint crackle of beans still roasting nearby. The commotion fades back into rhythm, into sanctuary, and though you never moved from your cushion, you feel as if you've weathered a small storm, simply by sitting still. The door closes on the officials, their stiff silhouettes swallowed by the dark street outside. What remains behind is relief, warm and immediate, like steam bursting free after a lid is finally removed. Shoulders drop, jaws loosen, and cups rise in toasts, both mock and sincere. It's as if the room has survived a sudden earthquake and decided, unanimously, the only reasonable response is to drink more coffee. You feel it too, that strange quickening of heart, followed by the delicious easing when danger dissolves. The lute sighs back to life, plucked slow and absent-minded, and someone mutters that the officials probably only showed up out of jealousy. Palace silence to dull. Coffeehouse noise too irresistible. The remark earns a chorus of knowing laughter. Perhaps it's true. Even the most loyal servant can't roast parchment and expect it to perfume the night like coffee beans do. You notice the air feels heavier now, not dreadful, just late. Even the smokers leaning against the wall inhale slower. The puppets have been put away, the dice collected, and the scholars have lost their momentum. Politics has given way to Jan's arguments dissolved into companionable silence. The room has changed, from the bright chatter of midnight to something softer, something nearing dawn. And as your own head tips slightly back, tempted by fatigue, you realize you've been here. Hours. Time melted in steam and laughter. Outside awaits the pale blue quiet of the Ottoman night, but inside, the braziers glow with dying embers, their smoke curling lazily toward the rafters. Asterisk, reluctantly, or rather rhythmically you stand. The cushion resists you, forming the last protest of fabric that has learned the art of keeping people anchored far longer than intended. You stretch your legs, pins and needles reminding you that history isn't gentle on circulation. The man beside you grins, presses hand to heart, and gives you a nod that means you belonged here tonight. You nod back, warmed more than the coffee could account for. Asterisk, the boy with the tray rushes to retrieve your cup. He pauses, catches your gaze, and for a moment, his grin suggests mischief, as if this whole night was orchestrated for your benefit alone. You suspect someday he'll be the storyteller, reanimating moments like these until newcomers marvel exactly as you did. Asterisk, stepping across the wooden threshold. You're met with immediate contrast. The street is cooler, the air damp with the faint brine of the Bosporus. Not far away, the bright lanterns of the coffee house spill faint light into the alley, but beyond its glow, everything folds into shadows. It's as though you've walked out of someone else's dream into a half-empty stage. Asterisk. The city at night has its own soundtrack. Horse hooves echo faintly against cobblestones. A dog barks distantly, its call answered by another across rooftops. Wind threads its way through narrow alleys, tugging shutters and whistling in wooden beams. It's quieter than the coffee house, yes, but alive in its own slower fashion. And after the cacophony of voices and instruments indoors, the silence feels like thick balm across your ears. A hush that belongs to streets, to neighbors, sleeping, to the rhythm of a city that has finally curled under its own blankets. Asterisk, historians. Note that Ottoman nights were far from still. Bakers already worked, preparing dawn bread. Fishermen mended nets in lantern light. Guards patrolled with torches flickering. Cats prowled alleys with more freedom than courtiers in palaces. You pass some of these scenes, your sandals quiet against cobbles. A baker yawns, stretches flour across a board, and nods at you with soft recognition, the universal language of the midnight worker, greeting another wanderer of restless hours. Asterisk, above you, the minarets cut against the night sky, shadows of grandeur against stars. They do not hum loudly, not here, not now. The palace lies somewhere beyond, walled, vast, perpetual, and yet, after the place you've just left, the palace feels muted, even lonely. You know now why people flocked instead to those noisy benches, why they gathered to sip, argue, and laugh until shadows dissolved into morning. Palaces may hold authority, but coffee houses hold life. Asterisk, you pull your robe tighter, feeling the faint buzz of caffeine lingering in your veins, as though you've stolen a fragment of the night to carry with you. Your steps echo softly in the narrow street, your own rhythm, steady, content. Asterisk, ahead glows the thin suggestion of dawn. Not yet bright, just the faint paling of sky above the Bosporus, lamps gutter. The city crackles lightly, somewhere between dreaming and waking, and you, gentle intruder, apprentice of foam and shadow, walk within it, heart still humming with songs, debates, and laughter that hours ago you weren't part of, but which now feels stitched into your skin. Asterisk, asterisk, the streets stretched quiet before you now, carrying the faintest glow of approaching dawn. You walk slowly, your soles pressing against worn cobblestones that seem to hold centuries of footsteps, layered one atop another. Behind you, the din of the coffee house has dimmed into memory-muffled laughter. Lute strings, clattering dice, voices rising like foam against porcelain. It still thrums in your body, an echo that lingers, even though the room itself is gone. Asterisk, the city feels different here, outside, less boisterous, more contemplative. The air wraps itself around you in cool, damp folds, the kind of chill that whispers of the Bosporus nearby, the wide waters still breathing, reflecting moonlight into a slow shimmer. Lanterns gutter along the street, some nearly out of oil, flickering like stars fighting sleep. Merchant stalls, shut for the night, stand as crooked little skeletons of a marketplace. Canvases tied down to hide their treasures from street cats and opportunistic hands. Asterisk, your step slows. Maybe it's the caffeine still buzzing faintly in your pulse. Or maybe it's the sense that the night has stretched thinner toward its edges, fragile, ready to give way to morning. You glance up. The clouds are faint veils. Above, and tucked between them, is the constant stars burn steadily. The same eyes that peered down on poets and scholars in that smoky room you just left. Asterisk, strange, isn't it? To think that while coffee cups emptied and refilled, while puppets quarreled on their screen, while cats demanded fealty and dice fell like tiny avalanches. Above, the heavens simply watched, patient, unmoved. Yet, somehow, the people below shook the empire louder than silence ever could. Historians still wonder if decisions made there, in firelit coffeehouses, shaped laws, rebellions, or entire generations of thought. Perhaps the stars twinkled a little brighter, just to mark the fact. Perhaps not. That's the charm of wondering. Asterisk, you cut through a narrow lane, passing a baker, preparing dough in silence. He glances up, eyes glazed with flour, and grins faintly, as if you are kinfellow, guardians of wakefulness. You nod back, warmth flickering in both of you, a wordless admission that the world feels more intimate at this hour. That intimacy, the closeness of noise, of cups and games, and whispered breath still coats you like roasted aroma. Asterisk, eventually you slow your pace even more, until your stride mimics the drowsy breath of the city itself. The stones are cool, your lids heavy. The night has not asked you to conquer it, only to witness it tan, to let it soak into your skin like the bitter trace at the bottom of a cup. Asterisk, and now, the afterglow settles. Not the firework burst of caffeine, not laughter tipping you backward, but a quiet glow in your chest, a curious peace. The Sultan's court will rise with its stern decrees. Palaces will fill with their morning procession of scribes. Markets will unroll their fabrics and spices like rainbows across wood. But amid all this, you know that the heart, beating loudest, lies, not in marble halls, but in smoky rooms where cups click, dice rattle, voices scatter, and shadows flicker on white screens. Asterisk, you've carried a part of it with you already, the warmth, the hum, the laughter pinned behind your ribs like a familiar tune. It thrums through you even as your feet slow and your eyes begin to droop. Coffee wakes the body, but stories, oddly enough, calm it. And you, still buzzing but softened, find yourself drifting inside the memory of both. Asterisk, at last, you pause at the slope above the city. The Bosporus hums faintly, ships swaying on invisible currents below. In the distance, a rooster announces its unremarkable. Yet it might be the same call. Scholars once argued about, merchants once timed, storytellers once mimicked. The city, always alive. Asterisk, and you, a wanderer, in its shadows of coffee, laughter, and stories. Feel it settling into your chest, as something you'll carry quiet, but eternal as you fade softly toward rest.